I begrudgingly stumble out of bed, knocking the dust from my eyes. So taken aback from this early hour is my body that I can scarcely recall why I'm up at all. Kicking into gear like that 2002 HP Family desktop, like a CRT TV, my brain slowly fades into consciousness. I glance over at my television stand, equipped with that comically oversized sound system my elderly neighbor paid in exchange for fixing his computer. I finally remember why I set my alarm so outlandishly early. Destiny's first ever expansion pack was released at midnight, and I'm waking up early before school to get some hours invested. Just days earlier, I finally achieved maximum level 30 on my Titan. Reviled days of grinding spin metal and helium fragments in endless circles blasting Imagine Dragons on that ludicrous sound system had paid dividends. I was as powerful as one could materialize. Memories of lamentable nightfalls cursed with outlandish modifiers dance in my mind, quivering in head-glitched corners playing whack-a-mole in my skull. Seething at so-called teammates ignoring homegrown YouTube guides rushing to their inevitable but amusing deaths. Gripping my mind, memories of shotgun wombo combo kill streaks and raging enemy teams, the endless parade of deaths every time our fire team found ourselves in the parkour section of the raid, or for that matter, the desolate harpy maze. There was always that one funny guy who insisted he could solo kill a harpy on the way to the loot chest without telling the rest of us of his ill-fated plan. Popping bubble shields in a last-second desperate attempt to not wipe Atheon for the 15th time in a row as Wade's mother grows ever angrier at her son's delayed presents from family dinner. One bright guy chimes in from the back, "Hey, we should just cheese him! For the last time, we aren't cheesing Atheon. It takes longer to cheese than it does just to defeat him if you luckheads would just focus fire when I tell you to." Running shinies.
Looks like we got ourselves a batch of shinies.
Inevitably, upon finally upending Rebelzilla, that half-witted, vexing, shop-rag deadweight of a teammate gets Gallahorn as you stare dead-eyed at a black abyss outside of your window. It's 3 a.m. again, and you have class in the morning. Wait, where was I? Oh, right, Dark Below. Still shattered by this ghoulish wake-up hour, I make my way to my Glacier White Destiny Edition PlayStation 4. I grab my white plastic gamer throne and pan my way over to the PlayStation Store. I almost forgot. I pre-installed this last night. Alright, time to rock. I drop into orbit and open the directory. Starts on Earth. Shake it off. It'll be alright, man. I sink in, and suddenly it's 7 a.m. I have this new Husk of the Pit auto rifle that apparently needs some sort of quested upgrade path. Pounding at the door, it's my mother. "Hey, you gotta get to math class!" Karabas, she's right. I run to the car and we shuttle off to my Romanian Algebra 2 teacher. Oh man, but I just can't focus. All I'm thinking about is getting home and figuring out where that Necrochasm questline is going to take me. Where do you think the next mission will be located? I wonder if we'll wind up on the moon again. Hey, maybe there'll even be a wizard.
That wizard came from the moon.
I gloss over and my school subconscious takes over. I've developed the skill over the years of endless No Child Left Behind lessons to listen only for meaningful progress to the core material. My boredom so grotesque, I've given up any hope that high school ever entertain me again. My mind conjures scenarios to play through. Shall we dream of winning another NASCAR championship again? Nah, skip that one. It's played out. How about attending college anywhere but this ho-dumpkin little town? Yeah. Been there, done that. How about we dream up what that new raid will look like? The trailer looked pretty sick, right? Perfect. Now this is the kind of programming I was looking for. I wonder if it'll be laid out the same or if it'll be totally different. Think there will be an Oracle-like section? Hey, I wonder if there will be another way to cheese the bosses. I'll have to get some Warlocks on my initial fire team to test. What gun will be meta? Hey, are you paying attention? You got a test coming up. Why did you do this to me? I'm keeping up just fine. It's going to be impossible for me to find that mental channel again. Soon enough, I'm back home and I've managed to dodge the need to immediately attend to my homework. Not sure how I pulled that one over, but never mind. I've got business to attend to. I can't fall behind my friends. I wonder who has the highest level so far. Did any of them stay home from school? I wonder if anyone took off from work. I hop into a party chat. They've already beaten the story in my absence. I squat up and we quickly annihilate the quite frankly astonishingly meager sum of 3 story missions and move on to grinding strikes, crucible, dailies, and weeklies. No shot, man. They really got me grinding relic iron still? It's almost 2015! Days go by and I've exhausted everything there is to do on my Titan. However, I've considered this outcome, and in preparation for the expansion, I've leveled 2 extra Titans to level 20. They're ready for transfer grinding. I find 2 poor souls to run the new Nightfall. Omnigul. The screeching banshee bleeds my mental capacity to execute simple functions. I call out to my fire team, "You gotta try something, man! My best arc damage weapon has been reduced to a pea shooter!" He shouts back at me, "You know what? I'm overusing arc weapons. I'm just going to use Galahorn and see if it does anything. I am not getting reset to orbit again. He heroically swoops from behind the bend that we've been head glitched at for what seems like hours. Surging with heroic inspiration, I jump to the walkway and empty my entire magazine of peas into the floating abomination. She doesn't flinch. Takes one look at my sorry playstyle, murmurs out some hive gibberish that roughly translates to, hold up, let me look this up. Here it is. It translates to skill issue. Wow, alright. After slandering my soul, she proceeds to one-tap my entire health bar before I can even process her aggro switch. My ghost almost mocking the stupendously dim-witted choice of actions. I look over and the inspiration for my actions is lying in a pile of dust. It's up to the sensible amongst us. Our third squad mate has her mind quivered behind the bend. Beside himself at our collective stupidity, he says, "Guess we wiping, huh?" Leaps from safety and lets out a primal rage upon this ghastly hive hag. Just like that, somehow he's pulled it off. Elated, we all just take a breath. What feels like hours go by and I break the silence. Run it back? They laugh in my face and nearly instantly disconnect. Over the coming days, I drag them back to this horrific experience. At least now I have better gear. End of the week, and now our squad has spent enough time chasing the ghost of Danica Patrick in the wilderness of Venus, becoming acquainted with the very pixel count of a spirit bloom. It's time. We breach the surface. Screens shift black. All I can hear is pure chaos. There's thrall everywhere! The datto expert chimes in from the back. You have to reach the light posts! Somehow, over the coming minutes, we make it to what appears to be the end of this nightmare. We've lost brethren along the way. I'm still cackling over one poor soul's poorly timed demise at the bottom of a pit. I get one tap of the largest ogre I've seen since Fogoth. The team is in shambles. All coordination breaks down. It's now a free-for-all. A mad dash commences down this comically long corridor of death. The last remaining souls perish, all except for the bravest amongst us. All our screens turn white and suddenly we've advanced. It takes a collective hot minute for us to mentally recover, and we spend the next 2 days trying to beat the remaining sections. Finally, at some point, just as my mind has about had it, we break through and Crota is defeated. All of us scramble the comms in elation.
I got the ghost!
We've all gotten an assortment of weapons and armor more powerful than we've ever bore witness to. This is what those settlers must have felt like discovering the new world, and I'm hooked. I spend the next 4 weeks grinding every hour I could, and by the end of it, I'm the first in our fire team to reach the new level cap. Level 32! Ha ha! I gloat to my pathetic level 31 friends, dancing around enemies that could liberate my teammate's body from this mortal plane in a single wire rifle shot. What a rush. Years later, and I endearingly look back on these memories. Some decade later, and the words still flow seamlessly from mind to paper, or screen, I suppose. I could wax poetic about so many other moments of triumph, tribulation, and jubilation. The echoes of this brief time frame still loom large in my mind today. Some of the astute amongst you have already noticed that I utilize the Destiny soundtracks in my videos. Those redemption arc stories wouldn't have hit the same way without the tower score crescendoing in the background. Lifelong personality traits were forged in those virtual alien trenches. Yet, by the end of 2015, I was no longer playing Destiny. I never made it to the much better received and acclaimed Taken King expansion, nor the later Rise of Iron one. The first time I ever laid eyes on this beautiful social space was in preparation for this very video. I have occasionally touched base with Destiny's sequel over the years, playing the new story missions, and quickly shelving the game for the next 2 years. How could I have gone from one of Destiny's most passionate young players, the kind of player they designed this entire 10-year franchise around, to just another outside observer? I mean, I was sage scumming internet core cheesing Crota for shinies in pure service to the community. I can still recall playing the Winter's Run Strike, discussing with my friends where we would be when Destiny's final release would drop. You see, Destiny was amongst the first games to ever launch with an explicit 10-year timeline. First game releasing in 2014, and the final game in its expansions sometime in 2024-2025. To a wide-eyed 15-year-old, these dates seem so distant. I mean, I'd be 25 years old. I'd probably have left this frumpy town behind. I mean, I was probably in the midst of a successful career as a NASCAR driver. Maybe I was even married. Who knows? What I did know at the time was that I envisioned myself still playing this game some decade in the future. So what changed? What could have possibly happened that caused me to practically abandon my fandom? I was obsessed. I was respected. I had crafted friendships around this game. Unfortunately, on an uneventful and completely forgotten day, I woke up. My heart shattered in some ways as I began to add the pieces of the puzzle together. Destiny, like so many other games would become over the coming decades, was designed to extract as much time from the players as humanly possible. Design elements that prioritize playtime were baked into the very nature of the game. Player satisfaction, the game's story, general gameplay, all of those were second rate to player engagement. And not to say that those other elements were not priorities in design, but if a choice was to be made between elongating playtime or increasing player satisfaction, the former was selected every time. As I stood proud in the tower showing off my level 32 badge to the world, I realized in a few short months I was going to have to repeat this entire process, beat for beat, step for step, all over again. When House of Wolves released, all of my favorite gear would be obsolete, and I'd have to spend another 50 plus hours endlessly grinding, all to wind up right back where I am now. This process would then repeat itself for the next decade 2 to 3 times a year, and by the end of it, I would have spent thousands of hours playing this franchise. For some, that was enticing. For some, the faux workism escapism was desirable. However, for me, as I visioned what a 25-year-old version of myself would look like, I couldn't picture myself playing this game anymore. Not like how a 15-year-old version of myself could anyway. I cut my losses, sold my copy, and to this day, my relationship to video games has never quite been the same. And now, I don't want to immediately paint this design choice in some sinister light. And like I mentioned earlier, for some, this was exactly the kind of game they had been craving. Now, those players would go on to enjoy this game for the next decade, crafting new memories along the way, bonding with an ever-increasingly dedicated fan base. I'm sure it worked wonders for the studio's financial bottom line, especially with the inclusion of microtransaction cosmetics and items. It's widely understood in the games industry that more time-invested players spend more money on an individual game, and I'll speak more on this later in the video. More money justifies more investment, more employment, and these are all good things for game success. We need variety in our game design. It's one of the key factors that help folks stay lifelong gamers and not flame out of the hobby with time. We can't have every game be a competitive online system, nor every game be a highly cinematic story type game. Can't have every game be an MMO, FPS, RPG grindathon like Destiny. Variety is the spice of life. So why is it that I can't shake this feeling of melancholy when thinking back on Destiny? The reality was that I had fallen in love, but of the worst variety. Unrequited love. The world building, the art direction, that emphatic soundtrack that you've been listening to. I had loved Destiny. But Destiny didn't love me back. Over the years, I've learned many things about myself on a chemical level. You could call me a thrill seeker, sensation seeker, daredevil, adrenaline junkie. What I call myself is a generational addict. Modern academic research is slowly coming to the consensus that genetic factors play a significant role in one's likelihood to pursue risky behaviors or fall into addictive patterns. According to Daniel Dick, a professor of psychiatry at Rutgers University, some 50% of the differences in how likely people are to develop substance use problems stem from DNA differences, though it varies a little by substance. Research suggests that alcohol addiction is about 50% heritable, aka from your parents, while addiction to other drugs might be as much as 70% heritable. From a young age, I became acutely aware that my family ledger was painted red from addictive behaviors. Gambling, drinking, smoking, illicit behavior, seeking out risky endeavors. Ash Ketchum would have been proud of the way I caught them all. It's something I'll wrestle with to my grave. I've done hours and hours of research into the topic of addiction sciences, all in a desperate hope that any words of wisdom would assist me in finding successes, redirecting my attention away from my addictions and toward my passions. At the end of the day, this kind of brain wiring can benefit you significantly if harnessed in the right way. One of the ways I attempt to combat my dopaminergic choice making is to force myself to a rather strict daily schedule. When creating this schedule, I engage the executive functioning portion of my brain in order to better align my daily actions with my desired goals. This allows my brain to default to the choice I already made in the past rather than indecisively relying on my dopamine system to pick my next activity. I would have never gotten off my keister and made my first YouTube video had I not adopted this schedule system. So what does it look like? No, it's fairly simple: some daily movement, some work, a lunch break, hang out with my family, etc. However, the key and the reason I bring any of this up is free time. For me personally, there just isn't the kind of time left in the day to pursue gaming like I could when I was a child. I'm sure for some this doesn't ring true. However, I'm willing to bet that for a lot of you listening, this is a very relatable experience. For whatever reason it may be, for many of us, the ability to play a game 10 plus hours a week just isn't realistic. Certainly not over a long period of time. At the risk of painting myself a waffling, self-interested hypocrite, with this knowledge, I'm not so sure Destiny wouldn't have been a larger success had it changed up its formula just ever so slightly, to have set their priorities in minorly different orders. Maybe, in fact, this design choice is inherently hostile to the very audience that play them. And that's what I mean when I titled this video, "They don't make video games for adults anymore." It's not because they don't include gory details or touch on adult topics like financial asset markets. Rather, the video game market has become increasingly saturated with titles that are simply unenjoyable if you aren't capable of dedicating unrealistically high values of time to them. I'm here to make the case, if selfishly, for an increase in what I like to call disposable games. Games that are designed from the very start to have an endpoint, a conclusion. A moment where you will inevitably stop playing the game and move on to other titles. I'm going to make this argument in 3 simple sections, and if you agree with me in the end, a simple call to action. Number 1 is the creative artwork angle. Number 2, the player satisfaction angle. Number 3, the financial angle. Starting from the top with the least likely to compel change, the creative angle. This is purely going to be video essayist op-ed, no source-cited sentiment. However, at the end of the day, that truly is the entire point of art. A brief tangent. One of my silliest pet peeves are folks who try to posit authorial intent as the only or most important interpretation in art. I believe the real beauty in art is that it really is only meaningful in the eyes of the beholder, that its truest form can only be experienced by you. No one else will have the exact same emotional response to art. It's by design the only opportunity that humans have of peering into the messy web that is our consciousness. Every subtle detail about what makes you, you, comes out when engaging in arts. For some, an art piece might elicit fear, while in others, relief. With artists with thinking, feeling, intending when creating the piece is, by design, unimportant to the end consumer. The artist was able to capture their essence in the work, and when presented to the rest of humanity, they will interpret it however easiest comes to them. And this creates amusing situations where an artist might make a work intentionally knowing it will be misinterpreted by the very people it's meant to target. Great examples of this are Green Day's American Idiot, and most famously, Bruce Springsteen's Born in the USA. In each case, the kind of person who is most likely to disagree with the artist's intent are the ones bumping along. Patriotic compilations set to the boss's anti-Vietnam, anti-modern American track pose a wild dichotomy. However, this enigma is best encapsulated by Nirvana's In Bloom, with lyrics directly addressing this phenomenon. He's the one who likes all our pretty songs, and he likes to sing along, and he likes to shoot his gun, but he knows not what it means when I say yeah. To me, this perfectly embodies why I love art. It allows the human condition to be fully explored on both sides. That no one will ever truly understand you, and you will never truly understand anyone else. What we can do is interpret what others create through our own lens and try to relate those experiences to others. It's within this lens of artistic interpretation that I personally find value in games whose experiences complete themselves, to have an ending. Part of this human walk is that we interpret this world through beginnings and ends. To not end is generally off-putting. One tool musicians can use to instill a sense of dissonance, dread, anxiousness, discomfort is to intentionally avoid resolving the melodic pattern of the music. It's incredible how deeply wired this need for resolution is in us. As much as I love Minecraft, I have always disliked how the game doesn't have a proper endpoint. The gameplay loop is predicated on the idea that you will inevitably get bored and slowly fade away from playing, rather than end satisfied and potentially craving more. This mentality was captured very well in a video made by Annie Austin, linked below. I know this may be hard to believe, but my family and friend group is fairly nerdy. I share a deep connection to the Star Wars franchise with my mother, and when hunting out a Christmas present for her this year, I found myself in a comic geek culture store. While walking around, one of the staff members complimented me on my Aperture Science shirt. This one. We discussed how rare it is to see Portal-related merch in the wild, and they made a common remark expressing a desire for Valve to create Portal 3. What happened next might shock you. No, I'm kidding. However, I did surprise him by expressing my gratitude that Portal hasn't received additional titles in the past decade. To me, some of the beauty in enjoying the Portal franchise is knowing that Shell, GLaDOS, Wheatley, and the Turret's stories all came to satisfying conclusions. The finality of it all adds some layer of enjoyment to the game in its current state. Now, of course, I'd play a Portal 3 to death, but that doesn't mean it would necessarily add to the first two's enjoyment. It might even take away some of that zeal if the release works against my initial artistic interpretations. It's through this lens that I make argument number 1 for disposable games. Stories and experiences are best enjoyed knowing there is a true endpoint, and thus, typically, player satisfaction will be higher with games featuring true terminations. This leads me directly into our next argument, the player satisfaction angle. By prioritizing game time, it necessarily requires sacrifices to things like overall satisfaction. Just like how overly long video essays belabor their point and waste viewers' time. But now wait a second. Games who prioritize playtime also feature heavy use of details that provide nothing of value, rather to waste your time. A great example of this are these endless Sparrow sections in Destiny, spawning you at the exact same location just to hop on your virtual Vespa and see just how far into the mission you can take your trusty time saver. No one can argue that features like this can add to satisfaction, and I can provide you an instance where this exact decision positively impacted my enjoyment of a game. In Jedi Fallen Order, there is zero fast travel, and you spawn in the exact same location, same as in Destiny. However, there are two crucial differences in execution that completely change the end result. In Destiny, your gameplay intended action is to speed through empty landscapes as fast as possible, seeking the actual point of the mission. However, in Jedi Fallen Order, not only are you on foot, but engaging with the environment in these transitional places is far more enjoyable. While in Destiny you might be able to spot the occasional spin medal, in Jedi Fallen Order you progress story beats, discover your abilities, and find numerous carefully crafted experiences for the sole purpose of fleshing out the world building. However, even with all of that said, the sequel Jedi Survivor rightfully implemented fast travel, allowing users the choice to either explore entirely naturally or save themselves some time. Enabling player agency in this action allows both styles of users to find their most enjoyable paths. For myself, that shifted. When I first played Survivor, I intentionally avoided fast travel to experience how I perceive best. However, upon replaying the game, it allowed me to be more efficient in experiencing the game exactly how I saw fit, now knowing all the game had to offer. So even when executed very well, it's still better to allow player agency in any mechanic that might be perceived as time wasting, enabling higher player satisfaction. Subtle choices like these are littered throughout games like Destiny.
I don't even have time to explain why I don't have time to explain.
With persistent ego-striking moments where the game disrespects your valuable time. Removing bloating features like these, or at minimum giving player agency in these features, creates higher player satisfaction, which I argue lends to better future game sale revenue generating opportunities than the opposing ideal. Speaking of revenue, our final argument, the financial one. If you can somehow recall 15 years ago, I mentioned I stopped playing Destiny because of these choices. It then doesn't take a genius to piece together that I didn't wind up spending as much money as Activision and Bungie would have hoped I would. These choices directly led to a loss of game sale and expansion revenue, and yes, I'm intentionally being very careful in my wording of that sentence. If this was the case for myself, then it isn't unreasonable to assume that it was also the case for thousands, maybe millions of other adults. However, I'm not fully convinced the same lack of respect for your time isn't increasingly becoming an issue for modern children. According to a study by Sandra Hofferth of the University of Maryland and John Sanderberg of George Washington University, children's free time fell some 25% between 1981 and 1997. This trend has only continued into the 21st century with endless lessons, sports activities, social events, etc. The modern child has less time than ever to choose what they want to do, including gaming. The modern impossible to sit down or risk falling behind game design is holistically incompatible with most adult lives and increasingly incompatible with even children's lives. So if all these arguments exist in favor of moving towards disposable games, then why does it seem that the modern gaming landscape is moving in the exact opposite direction? Believe it or not, there was a time when all of these stances were held by publishing companies and game studios. Despite our modern media attitudes towards executive leadership groups, for the most part, they aren't entirely dense. Well, to answer the question, a new games industry economics patch came out on April 3rd, 2006, and nothing would ever be the same. To this point in the history of the games industry, there had been three main ways to generate revenue. The first was to sell a games cabinet to a local arcade, generating an initial revenue stream, then you'd collect a license fee on the game as it's being used. The second evolved with home computers and home consoles, to directly sell the game to your customer for a one-time fee. Finally, there was the expansion pack. Normally sold as another disc, this sale was supplemental to a previously purchased mainline title, expanding, hence the name, the game in some form or capacity. So if you wanted to increase revenue, you, for the most part, had to create a new experience for the end users. Now I do want to mention a fourth method, that being the subscription model. Now, while these models did exist, they weren't overly common due to their reliance on internet connectivity and general unproven nature. However, as home consoles became widely internet connected for 7th generation, Xbox 360 and PS3, a new distribution method became available. By distributing expansion packs or even entire games over the internet, you reduce your marginal cost to almost zero, marginal cost being costs associated to produce one additional unit of an item. Now, this savings was either directly passed to the company or the customer. All of this being a fantastic example of efficiencies at play in an economic system. This efficiency was realized not only marginally, but also in fixed upfront costs associated with an expansion pack. Most products require an MOQ, or minimum order quantity. This limits the, for lack of a real word, nicheity of a product. Each product category is different and requires different MOQs. For the gaming industry, there wasn't any reasonable way to try a new concept for an expansion without significant upfront risk from capital investment. With the advent of digital expansions, the risk had vanished. The first widely understood, anyway, company to gamble on a new product line was Bethesda through their infamous Horse Armor pack. For the laymen who have somehow managed to watch this far into a gaming-related video without clicking off, first of all, thank you. And second of all, this horse armor was a $2.50 purchasable cosmetic item that would change the visual aesthetic of your horse in the game Oblivion. At the time, causing a cosmic hypernova amongst the community for the efficacy and impact this choice might have on the future of gaming. Fast forward 18 years, and the economic landscape of gaming couldn't be more different than it was heading into 2006. The very way a business goes about revenue maximization in 2025 has taken a 360 no-scope. Mom, get the camera! Oh my god, I just can't stop winning! Wait, where is my wallet? What have you done with my wallet? By accident or intentionally, Bethesda had unleashed purgatory on gamers who hadn't yet even been born. You see, in the wake of the success of Oblivion's Horse Armor and others like it, game studios and publishers alike sought to understand the phenomena better. The ravenous response to purchasable cosmetics didn't align with previously held notions about what made a game or expansion good, and thus worth purchasing. These cosmetic DLCs were generating more revenue than the actual game itself in some cases. The purchase behavior of their customers had turned non-logical, so many turned to psychologists and human behavior experts to study and utilize this non-logical behavior for the benefit of their companies. As mentioned way earlier, one of the key findings they have unearthed over the years is that high playtime engaged players are more likely to purchase cosmetics and expansions over highly satisfied players. So unfortunately for us end users, what primarily came of this was the introduction of addiction science into gaming. I'm sure there were many good-hearted scientists enlisted in these projects initially, their minds pure, trying to create the most satisfying art they could. This purity faded with time, and most games are fundamentally compromised in favor of addiction cycle mechanics. The Madden dev team has spent the last 15 years focused on addictive game modes like Ultimate Team over core gameplay improvements. Now we have literal, legally distinct from, casinos and video games. Some governments have attempted to understand and regulate this growing epidemic. Mind you, most congressional hearings on the topic have all the comprehension of a lobotomized ostrich. Unsurprisingly, these attempts have been largely unfruitful, leaving a wake of latent games in the dust, games like Destiny, and players like myself. The true tragedy in this is that so many beautiful human minds are creating some of the greatest works of art ever conceptualized. All of it turned to ash by those lording over their salaries. I'm sure you can think right now about a game that initially sparked wonder in your eyes, yet the longer you played, the more you became undone by its design. And I don't believe this industry is so tone-deaf to its audience that it's incapable of producing products that truly satisfy its players. Sure, for some failures, that's probably the case. But for the vast majority of modern games, the problem lies with the beluga-sized tumor growing within. Folks like myself who are genetically prone to addiction are being exploited, their excitement wrestled out of their control and weaponized against their best interest. Convergence of artistic and corporate interests seldom overlap, but when they do, the beauty can leave one speechless. So then, how do we do it? How do we ensure that artistic and corporate interests align? Where do we start? Who do we target messaging to? For that, I need to explain one more concept. It wouldn't be a core video without a visit to Core University now, would it? Today's topic is corporate governance. A corporation, in its simplest terms, is a structure to effectively guide a group of people towards preset goals. Understanding this helps picture how a corporation is structured and thus who wields the most influence to change. Most companies that you see today are structured in similar ways, though there are significant exceptions that I'll cover later. In general, most large companies are run in a similar manner to how you've seen governments run. First, there is a company constitution, which could consist of many documents, such as, but not limited to, the Articles of Association, Memorandums of Association, etc. This constitution sets out how a company governs itself, how power is wielded, decisions are made, the managerial framework, guidelines for ethical conduct, and mitigating risk. In its simplest terms, how to run the company. This constitution can be altered through time, and just like how each country's constitution outlines different goals, so too do company constitutions. In this constitution, voting power is established between different stakeholders, varying from highly equal and democratic to dictatorial. Most corporations are set fairly equal, however, major exceptions to this include the likes of Meta, where one stakeholder wields significant voting power over others. I mean, how else do you think this ever came to be in a publicly held company? Now, stakeholders, of course, being those who are invested in the profitability, viability, and value assessment of a company, typically through proportional ownership stakes. These stakeholders vote regularly in stakeholder meetings to determine the goals, ethical direction, financial risk assessment, etc. These stakeholder meetings include voting to determine who will sit on the board of directors. I know this just keeps going, but stay with me, Zoomers, for the sake of video games. The board of directors is a group of individuals who are tasked with overseeing the company's operations, making strategic decisions, etc., all in the best interest of the stakeholders. Think of this group as our senators and congressmen. They represent large subsections of stakeholders in their actions. So let's run through an example company in order to better understand how corporate governance plays out in the real world. Say our company assembles flashlights, is named Brighton, and its corporate governance structure is fairly normal. In a recent stakeholder meeting, a vote was passed around floating the idea of merging our flashlight-focused company with Lumen, a manufacturer of LEDs, or light-emitting diodes, basically the thing that makes modern flashlights work. The case for the merger is made, and in this case, due to the constitution of the company, this decision must be made by the larger stakeholder group. They, after much deliberation, decide to merge the two companies, sticking with Lumen as the larger corporate name and keeping Brighton as the subsidiary that assembles flashlights. However, regarding the board of directors, they also decided to appoint the former chairman of Brighton as the new Lumen chairman, as Lumen's former chairman had become unpopular with the stakeholder group for not meeting their goals. After assembling their new board of directors, the stakeholder group makes it clear they expect large company value growth in the coming year, and the meeting is adjourned. The board of directors sets out a 7% year-over-year revenue growth metric in order to boost the company's value and meet those stakeholder expectations, thus, keeping their jobs. A year goes by and one of their competitors, Nightlight, has incorporated a new manufacturing technique that cut costs significantly. The Brighton subsidiary has had a terrible year. In an emergency stakeholder meeting, a vote is put forth to fire the current chairman of Lumen. Remember, he was the former chairman of the Brighton group pre-merger. The stakeholders now believe that he was clearly a terrible fit for the merged company, since even his original company wasn't keeping up with its competition. They vote to pay an excessively high compensation package to the current Nightlight chairman in order to gain his knowledge on that fancy new manufacturing technique. To justify this large compensation package, significant pressure was placed on the board to increase profitability. In desperation to keep their own jobs, they fire a significant portion of Lumen's lower-level staff to accommodate. And now obviously this scenario is made up, and the outcome of any stakeholder, board of directors, CEO, CRO, even middle manager's decision is highly variable. What I wanted to do was help you understand how corporate goals are set, and more importantly, by who. In this climate of hot take culture, I too often see reductive statements assigning praise or blame to individual actors within companies, namely CEOs, but also presidents, managers, etc., when far more often there is a confluence of influences that create a company's direction. The evil many feel lies in the dissociation many stakeholders have between their goal setting and the actions a board must take to meet those goals. A study by several universities, but led by the University of Alabama, stated the following: individuals not only morally disengage prior to committing an unethical act, but also morally disengage as a coping mechanism to reduce emotional duress. So then we can infer that as layers of separation increase, so does one's ability to justify unethical behavior. Alright, time to wake y'all up! Thanks for making it through Business 202 with Core. Refocusing back on this video's main theme, it's much easier to justify creating illegal underage gambling simulators, reworking game mechanics with addiction science, exploiting the vulnerable amongst us, and degrading the quality of art for increased profits when you don't even know it's happening. All you did was vote in a board of directors known for increasing gaming companies' shareholder value. Did you ever stop to ask yourself why they were so good at that? Was it that this group had employed addictive game design elements in the past, elements like daily login rewards, loot box openings, and paid cosmetics? It's not any one individual's actions that led us here, but a confluence of greed, layers of separation, and fear that did. So how do we go about pitching the idea that quality, satisfying games ought to be made over addiction simulators? Are we doomed? Nah. We just have to focus our messaging and actions on these keys. Number 1, using our collective voices towards stakeholders and key decision makers. We are living in an era of unprecedented public propaganda access. The social media apps, TikTok, YouTube, etc. The public now has more say over what does and doesn't become successful than ever before. So champion quality games, publishers, and studios. Tell your friends to avoid buying and supporting games that employ negative practices. Be a minor echo of positive change, and with enough voices, alterations will begin. Number 2, creating voting power within corporate structures for good. This is by far the hardest, but it'll be the most effective. It's imperative that a champion of our cause be present during decision-making processes, whether that's on the board of directors or just making it clear that the stakeholders in a company are okay with less profit in the short term in favor of long-term brand uplift. If you got some cash and want to make a positive change, start here. Finally, and most importantly, number 3, be a voice for positive change by buying quality games as much as financially responsible for your situation. If we can reset our buying habits to those prior to 2006, then the industry will follow and the style of disposable games will make a comeback along with quality. As I mentioned earlier, most of the music I pull for these videos is from video games, but not modern ones. My video game memories are mostly reflective, a distant memory that is slowly fading away. However, that's not because I don't enjoy gaming, nor is it that games are built for children. Rather, that through addiction science, gaming is now more time-consuming and anti-consumer than ever. The Destiny might have broken my heart, but I know deep down, because of y'all, the future of gaming is bright. And eventually, there will again come a day where I wake up at 4:45 a.m., itching to drop in. Thank you for watching this far, it's massively appreciated. If you enjoyed the content, feel free to watch another one. It's absolutely the best way you can support what I'm doing here. If you have any questions for me, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. I try to get to as many as I can. Thank you again.